Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at Hashi Vault Enterprise. That's a secrets management solution, and we're going to be focused on production grade cluster installs. So we're going to be targeting cloud providers such as Azure, GCP, and AWS. For today, I'm going to be testing it on my MacBook Pro, and then I'll be moving into more scenarios as the videos go on. So further ado, I hope you enjoy the content. If you do, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for future content releases. Thanks. Enjoy. We're going to kind of get started with installing Hashi Vault Enterprise. So before we do, let's kind of talk a little bit through what the product's offering is. So as you can see, this is their vaultproject.io site where you can see things about open source, self-managed, always free. Has a lot of good features for just out-of-the-box things you're trying to do. And then we can look at kind of what the difference is between the open source version enterprise and then the cloud offering, which we can do some videos on that if you'd like to dive into what HCP Vault can do for you. But today I'm going to focus on what the enterprise offering is. So we can basically just download a trial license to look and see some of the features that they're going to offer, kind of go through some of the things that we can test, from installing a cluster, a dev cluster, production ready cluster, and then we can talk about some of the extended offerings into different cloud providers like AWS, Azure, GCP, and then how you basically have replicated clusters and disaster recovery clusters if you needed to kind of expand, and then how some of the vault configuration works, from deploying different engines, auth methods, policy mapping. And then you can kind of see here different pricing options. So open source is always free. Get dynamic secrets engine, encryption, community support. Their cloud offering, which you can basically spin up clusters that they manage. So this is Hashi Vault team managing these, patching them, upgrading them, making sure that you're not really responsible for the infrastructure. And then the enterprise self-manage is what I'm going to be focusing on today. We'll dive into some of the enterprise features as we grow the videos, and we can kind of talk through some of those things. So I'm going to jump over to the documentation itself. So if you wanted to get some use cases around secrets management, how these things work, you can click on these videos and go through their documentation. Pretty robust things that you can find in here. And then as we grow to like a secrets engine, we'll give some real life scenarios around different ways to use it, from if you're using Kubernetes, Docker, Java apps, ingress controllers, serverless functions, and then native cloud specific functionality that you might not necessarily see out of the box for just a generic engine here. So I'm going to look at installing Vault. There's different ways you can do it. Some of these, depending on your configuration, you might have AWS, you might have Helm for Kubernetes, you might have your own CI/CD pipelines, different OS hardened images that you might have to use. That will kind of change around your configuration. So I'm going to show you one right now that just installs a self-managed Hashi Enterprise Vault cluster on my local, and then we can kind of dive into a scaled version on that later. So I guess let's go ahead and jump over to my VS Code and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to download Vault to your local machine, and you can see here I'm on this page because I'm going to be using Enterprise. If you download the version without Enterprise, then of course you're going to have some issues with some of the functionality, like custom namespaces. It's not even going to look for like a Hashi license, so you'll see like open source at the bottom when you spin up the Vault. So let's go ahead and get started with that. I've already downloaded the version on my machine, so I'm not going to go through that installation process, but you can kind of see I've got Vault version 112.2.enterprise. So I copied it into my homebrew bin directory. Of course, this could be whatever you need it to be for your local machine. And then I've went ahead and created a config.hcl. Of course, this could be very different, and we can kind of dive into some of these feature sets here. This could potentially be different if you're using a scaled version, depending on how you have your configuration set. This could be a load balancer. You could split load balancers between the cluster and the API. But for now, most of the time, it's going to be just internal to the cluster that it's the replication traffic needs to be part of. And then out of the box, disable mlock. I can kind of show you the documentation on that if you want to try to dive in. Hashi Vault mlock. Try to understand server configuration mlock. So you can see here, disable mlock disables the server from executing mlock syscalls. Mlock prevents memory from being swapped to disk. Disable mlock is not recommended unless using integrated storage. In this particular case, we are going to be using integrated storage. But if you're not, and maybe you're using console or something else to do this, then you might potentially want to turn this off and then following what the recommendations are here. I'm not going to be too much focused on this because we are using Raft. But then we'll kind of skip forward with that. So listener TCP, typically you're going to want to have this set to false and specify the cert commands that would go here. So if you were to come look at the configuration docs and look at TCP here, that you could add, the CA certificates, a PEM key, things like that, that would need to be kind of embedded. And depending on how you install, that cert would usually be in like some type of storage, maybe a cert manager. You'll want to rotate it, make sure it's up to date. And basically it just makes the traffic that's internal to the cluster encrypted. So you can do that. You see a telemetry block here. This could be quite a few different things. If you're doing audit logs versus telemetry data, you could use things like Datadog, Splunk, any custom engine you might use. If it's Elk, different logging mechanisms. So we can jump into some of these. If you guys want to kind of understand more, I can break down a video for that. UI, I'm going to go ahead and turn that on just so I can, I can log in and view things. The storage, so traditionally, since I'm on a MacBook, the storage itself would be something on each of the individual machines. So if you have a cluster that has 3 nodes, you're going to give it a unique node ID and a path on where you want the data to go. So if you were to look on the machine, I just traditionally do data plugins. This is kind of out of the box functionality. And plugins, we'll dive into that more in future videos if you want to get into custom plugins. But under data, what's going to happen is when you initialize the cluster, you're going to get a RAF folder that's got snapshots in it. And it's also going to have the RAF database that's being replicated from one node to the other. So that's just basically what that's doing. Of course, this could be very many different things. You could have things like auto unsealer. You could have console. You could have custom storage if you wanted to do that. If you wanted to use some type of cloud provider, you could swap this out. It just depends on your configuration. For now, I'm just going to stick with Raft on the local setup. I'm going to go ahead and activate a plugins directory, even though I'm not going to be messing with that right now. I'm just going to go ahead and activate it so I have it for future use. And since we're using Enterprise, I'm giving it a license path. And so you can see I have Enterprise installed and I have a license path with my trial key. So the next thing I'm going to do is, since I do have Vault installed, I'm going to go ahead and clear this folder out just because I want you guys to see what it looks like fresh. And then I'm going to go to my activate config here, and I have a few commands that I saved. So vault server -config.hcl is going to trigger everything we just talked about. And since I have the Vault CLI installed, it's going to go ahead and run it. You'll see that it's spinning up now and it's initialized. So what you'll usually want to do in a production environment or a non-prod environment of some sort, you'll want to put this in some type of service that would automatically kick this same command off. It would look a little bit different. I can dive into that as well if you want to see what that would look like. But really, it's just making sure that the Vault service is running within this instance. So again, if you have 3 of them, you're going to want to have this same config installed in all 3. And then you're going to basically activate them. And once Raft initializes, it'll select a leader, and then it will also start replicating to the other nodes. So again, as we grow with the videos, I'll show you what that looks like from a scaled version. And so what we can do now is go back to our config. I'm going to go to this other bash window that I have here. And I'm going to go ahead and set some variables. You can find these on the documentation from Vault as well for how to set these and what they mean. Since we're not using a certificate, I'm going to just skip verify, and I'm using a local address. Of course, this would need to be something from a production scenario where you have a production DNS URL, maybe a load balancer, could be anything really. So if you want to access it externally, so this is just how I do it for internal. And then I'm going to go ahead and run a vault operator init command, which is going to take the running service and tell it that I want to initialize based on the HCL config that we passed in. And what's going to happen is, you can see here, I've got unseal keys and a root token that's going to pop up. So since I don't have auto unsealing, I'm going to have to manually unseal this with the Shamir encryption engine. This isn't usually what you would do. You could use AWS KMS. You could use Azure Key Vault to basically do what I'm about to do here. And then managing these keys is automatically stored. So these are just temporary, just because I'm showing for this demo. And then what I'll want to do is just basically vault operator unseal. Because if you look at right now, if you do vault status, you'll see that the cluster is sealed. It's initialized as true. Has a threshold of 3. I don't even have 3, I only have 1. But if we go back to the browser, and now we go to localhost 8200, you'll get that my vault license is expiring, which is good because I can at least see that my vault license, it read my vault license. I can see that it has the right version, and it's telling me that my vault is sealed, so we need to unseal it. So what I'm going to do is just take my unseal commands here, paste them in, and then do vault status. And now I've got an unsealed vault. So what I can do is come back to Vault, and you can see now that I can log in. So I'm no longer waiting for an unseal. So what I can do is take the root token that I have here, and if you wanted to run some additional CLI commands, if you want to activate engines, you could drop it in here with the vault token. And this isn't usually what you want to do in production. This root token should be disabled once you have a authentication method enabled that allows admins to make the same changes as the root could be. And then if we get into like the namespace structure, we can kind of talk about what that means from namespace and policies. But right now I'm going to log into the root namespace. Oops, sorry, can't copy the whole command, just need the token. And we'll drop this here. And now I'm able to log in Vault. And so what this allows me to do is now I can activate engines, I can activate auth methods. You can see like different auth methods. Right now I have token for the root. There's MFA, we can set this guy up. And then you can see entities is going to be people that are logging into this Vault cluster. Groups I could create. We can start getting into infrastructure as code. You could use Terraform, you could use Ansible, you could write your own, you can use the CLI, the API that comes with Vault, and all this functionality can be automated, right? So if you're using pipelines like Azure pipelines, or I don't know, CloudFormation, or Terraform Enterprise, where you have a pipeline hosted in the cloud, it might make sense to write all your configuration in Terraform. And I can make some videos around what that looks like for using the Vault provider if you want to dive deeper. But now that we have Vault enabled, why don't we go ahead and activate a KV engine? So I'm going to head over to the documentation again for Vault. Let's go here and let's activate a secrets engine. So I think the most commonly used one is the static KV engine. So there's 2 versions that you have here. One version is going to be if you need to look at a lease on a key that's out there. Let's say that it expires in 30 days. You can set a variable to tell you when it's going to expire, and then you can read that in CTTL 30 minutes. You can check that as you read the secret in if you have like some type of cron job or automation where you need to have some custom logic to renew a token. That allows you the ability to query this and update. KV version 2 doesn't have that functionality, but it does allow you to have more direct integrations to kind of the newer ACL rule structure that you can see here. And so they're both relevant. It just depends on the use case. But for now, what I'm going to do is just activate version 2. And you can see here, I can enable it like this. So I'm going to basically do it from the CLI here. I've got my Vault token set already. So if I just go Vault Secrets enable KV Engine 2, you'll see it's enabled. And if I come back to the UI and do a refresh, I need to log in one more time here. Let me grab the token. Great. You can see I have a KV-v2 path, and that allows me to now generate secrets. And so what I can do with those secrets, this could be your API keys, it could be database secrets, really anything that you would need to normally store in some type of local file config. You now can store it in Vault and come up with some type of policies for access control, rotating secrets, things of that nature. So let's go back to, let me close this tab out. Let's go back to the documentation. You can see that there's some ways to upgrade from version 1 if you wanted to upgrade. It's really, again, up to the use case. I'm not going to do that for this demo. You can see the pathing. So the beauty in this is if you wanted to have multiple KV engine paths, you could do that through this scenario. So team 1, team 2, team 3. Team 1 can create, update, read. Team 2 might be able to delete. Team 3 might be some type of service account or automation that needs to just modify this. Yeah, team 1 update. So there's a lot of policy control around what you can do from, really activating it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new path here, and then you guys can kind of see what happens when you create the path from the CLI. The secret path mount. Let's do KVV2. Okay, and if you go back to the UI and refresh, my token. And you can, this actually is a TTL thing. You can fix this as well if you need to have a long-lived token. But you can see now I have a my secret, and I have foobar kind of in here to where you can now basically work with it. And the beauty in it is now I have version control. So if I wanted to change the variables, I could do like a new version, change these around. I'll just do it right quick. So this will just be new value, and just so you can see it. Did the version change? And save. And now you can see I'm on version 2. And the values are there. But if I ever needed to reference them from version 1, I could also do that. And you can also roll back to them if there was something that changed, like if someone updated a password and it didn't actually reflect yet, or something happened where you needed to roll back, this gives you the ability to do that quickly. Or if you wanted to control version controlled, if you had a way to, maybe you needed to run processing first, and version 1 is still relevant, and you need to use version 2 at some point, but you need to wait to roll it in, you could do that as well. So I'm thinking like some type of CI/CD pipeline, a server configuration takes longer to update than a secret does, something like that. You might do a little bit different. Okay, so back to the documentation. Now that that's done, you can then read it if you were using the CLI. And keep in mind, this is, to me, is like, you could do this with any type of configuration. So if you wanted to do a pipeline Ansible playbook, some type of automation, maybe Python, some type of coding language, you could do this. And again, these paths can be an API, could be Terraform, the Vault CLI. Right now I'm running it on my local, but it could be external to the cluster. You don't have to be logged in the cluster. And it also doesn't have to use this type of root token. It could use Azure AD, anything really that you wanted. It could use not Oracle, but it could use Okta, some type of OIDC provider. Or if you wanted to use something like April, you could do that as well. So I think for now, that's kind of, we activated a cluster. We have a working version of a secrets engine, and you can kind of see everything's unsealed. I have a license file. I have RAF storage. And then we can kind of dive into maybe some auth methods and see how that goes. I'm thinking maybe we look at activating maybe, let me see what we got here. Well, maybe we just stick with the KV engine and then we activate like April. That might be a good one. And then maybe like an OIDC. I could maybe Azure and Okta. I could do some of those as well. Radius is a good one. And then we go from there. That's going to be all for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching that content, installing Hashi Vault Enterprise, and kind of get an initial cluster set up with the KV engine. And next video, we'll be looking at auth methods and then adding more functionality to the existing solution. Look forward to it. Don't forget to subscribe, add some comments, and like the video. Appreciate it. Bye.